Get ready to learn
Get ready to learn
how to shoot landscapes.
how to shoot landscapes.
Today we're here in beautiful North Texas. We're going to show you 5 ways to take better landscape photos, no matter the kind of camera you have.
Or
Say
the
hi.
audience.
Or the audience. So the first thing to remember is that it doesn't matter what kind of camera you have. People take amazing landscape photos even with iPhones these days. So your camera shouldn't be something that holds you back. In addition to that, your lenses shouldn't be something that holds you back. In landscape photography, most of the time you're going to want to shoot your photos anywhere from f4 to f8. There's a big misconception that says that lenses are the sharpest at f8, but actually for a lot of lenses they're actually sharper at f4. It just depends on the type of camera and lens setup that you have. The first thing to taking a great landscape shot is to make sure you have a wide angle lens. No matter the camera that you have, as long as you have, if it's a crop sensor for example, you want to have anywhere from 18 to 55 millimeters, and the equivalent would be 24 millimeters to 70 millimeters on a full frame sensor. So right now I'm actually using the 15 to 30 by Tamron. It's a great lens, I definitely recommend it. We're setting the millimeters to be at 15, so we're going to get the widest shot possible, and that's going to allow us to get as much of the scene as we possibly can in the picture. Second thing, typically you want to have a tripod with you. A tripod is going to stabilize everything. It's going to make sure that there's no motion shaking or that the picture is not sharp. After you've got your lens and your tripod, is to remember to set your ISO and your camera settings correctly. When you're taking landscapes, typically you're not worried about stopping too much motion because it's a landscape and there's not very much happening. Sometimes there might be some wind and we can address that. You know, you might have to bump your ISO up a little bit higher to get a faster shutter speed. But 90% of the time, you want to set your ISO to ISO 100. And that is true across the board. When I say 100, I actually mean that whatever your camera's lowest native ISO setting is, that's what you want to set your ISO to be. So, for example, on a Nikon, we have low 1, low 0.5, low 2.5 settings, or low 2.5 settings, and those are actually go lower than ISO 100. But the way that the cameras are designed is that the native lowest ISO, which would be 100, is going to give you the best dynamic range and the best color reproduction. The reason that they have lower than 100 ISO, or 50 on some cases, I think the Nikon D810 goes to 50, but the reason that they have lower than that is to help in extremely bright situations for video or just when you have a lot of light and you really need to stop it down. So you want to have your ISO set to 100. That's going to give you the cleanest possible photo from a noise standpoint. And then as far as your aperture goes, you want to have your aperture anywhere from f4 to f8. So now that we've got our camera set up and we've got our ISO and our aperture set up correctly, the next thing we want to do is find a good foreground and a background. You want to always have something to differentiate some distance. So you want to be able to lead the viewer's eye from close to far. Now that we've got our camera set up, we've got everything configured correctly, we've got our lenses chosen, we're gonna plan our shot. So what we want to do is make sure that a couple of things. When you're shooting landscape, it's really important to make sure that the light is right. So when the light's dead center in the sky, everything's going to be so bright and washed out. You're not going to get really good color from the landscape. So a scene that might not look so pretty during the day is going to be beautiful when the light's just right. So always make sure that you're shooting your landscape shots in good light. Right now it's almost 6 o'clock, so the sun's getting low on the horizon. It's kind of washing everything with light. It's giving really cool light direction. You might like to wait a little bit later to where the sun is lower in the sky, or you might like to start a little bit earlier to give you more time. Also, you can start first thing in the morning when the sun is just rising. That's going to give you the best color, it's going to give you the best light, it's going to give you great shadows. So let's get going. Right here we've got these awesome rolling kind of hills, and we've got these hay bales sitting, and we've got little crops of trees. So what I'm going to try to do is use one of them to kind of start the foreground, and then find something that's going to lead your eye into the background of the photo. So we have this little crop of trees here. I might use a log sitting on the ground as a foreground, and because I'm at f8, everything's going to be focused from the foreground to the background, so it can lead the viewer's eye off into the distance. So one thing that we need to talk about before we start getting into framing is which mode to shoot in. I recommend shooting in aperture priority. It's the A symbol. You can also shoot in manual if you're comfortable with manual, or you can shoot in shutter priority if you have to have a faster shutter speed and let the camera manually control everything else. But I don't recommend shutter priority because it's going to choose possibly an aperture that's not correct for landscape. Because remember, you always want to have your aperture set from f4 to f8. Now that we've chosen our shooting mode, one thing I always recommend doing that's going to get you better results when you're editing your photo is setting your camera to auto bracket. So what bracketing is, it's also known as HDR. Bracketing is going to take a picture that's a little bit higher exposed, maybe 1 stop or 2 stops higher, so you're going to get a 2-stop brighter shot. And then it's also going to take your normal shot, which would be a proper exposure, and then it's going to take one that's a lower exposure, which will make everything darker. That's going to let you take a really bright sky and take the shot from the darker sky and put it on the properly exposed shot. So we've got our scene here. I'm really liking how the sun is coming through. You can kind of see all the way back down into the rolling little valley there, and you have the trees in the distance, and we have the light coming through and hitting each and every one of these little logs here. So I'm going to use this as my scene because it's going to lead the eye back off into the distance. So I really like this framing here because the stick is kind of leading your eye, it's pointing towards the distance, which helps guide the viewer. You always want to guide the viewer whenever you're shooting. Whatever your subject is, you want to lead the viewer's eye to your subject, which is the landscape. So they start close when they're looking at the photo, and then their eye leads off into the distance. We've covered some great content today on how to get a better landscape photo. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe.
Try it again.
Thanks for joining us. I'm going to continue to shoot because this is a great land. Put that, don't hit me with that. Here, come here. Let's do this. Say bye to the people. I'm going to continue to shoot.
Bye, people.
Whoa. I'm going to continue to shoot. This is a great landscape. Be sure to subscribe. We're going to be coming out with more how-to videos in the future. Also, be sure to check out photoht.com where you can post any questions that you have and get feedback directly from other photographers. Thank you. We'll see you again in the future. Boop, 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 boop.